Well, we're going to move into the next group of settings now. The B series in the custom setting are for their exposure and metering. So these are all related to how the camera reads the light. The first one, the ISO sensitivity step value. The default from Nikon is 1/3 stop increments. And I think back in the days when we were shooting slide film, that was really crucial. Just a slight, minute adjustment made a big difference. For my own personal needs, I think that a half a stop works really well. I don't see a big difference in third stops, but you have the option anywhere from 1/3 to 1/2 to 1 full stop.
Yeah, because when I've been shooting with you and Moose, you'll say, expose for half a stop, and I'll be like, wait, mine's on third. How do you get a half?
Yeah.
And that's where you change that.
That's
okay.
right. That's in the menu. Again, this is what's so great about these cameras. I remember the day where we had to make ourselves suit the camera and the functions it had. Nowadays, each one of us can have the same camera, and our camera is going to be custom set and oriented to our own style of shooting.
So versatile.
So much more creative. Well, we've got 2 more settings where you have that option. The next one is EV steps for exposure control. So if I'm making these adjustments in my aperture or shutter speed, I can also set those for half steps, 1/3, or full stops.
Okay.
So I've got that set to half, and the same for exposure compensation, fine tune. I have them all set for 1/2, but they all give you those same 3 options. Now, easy exposure compensation, if I have that one active, rather than having to hit the exposure compensation button and turning the dial, all I have to do is turn the command dial. So it's quicker, it's easy, as they say, but there can be a danger. If you're shooting and you inadvertently turn that dial, you've just dialed in exposure compensation, so you got to be sure that you're paying attention if you do activate that mode. Now, we had talked about center weighted area and how it meters the whole area with an emphasis on a certain amount of the center of the frame. The default from Nikon is 12 millimeters, but you can go anywhere from 8 to 20 millimeters depending on the size of your subject. Again, that's oriented right into the center of the frame, so if for any reason you were shooting center weighted, you may also want to use the auto exposure lock button.
So I'm also seeing in that menu average. What does average do for the center weighted?
Well, in my own terminology, I call it kind of a poor man's matrix metering.
Okay.
It basically is trying to give you an average of what it's seeing in the viewfinder, not nearly as well as matrix metering can do.
Okay.
Now, we've also got fine-tune optimal exposure. I never say always, or I always say never. Well, whatever. Anyway, basically what it is sometimes in the field somebody will say, I always have my camera set to -1/2 or +1. And it's interesting because we all have different readings or different ways of the way we set the camera and how it will meter. Well, fine-tune optimal exposure gives you the capability of actually dialing in up to 1 stop either direction as your default. So I can say -1, that's my 0 setting on the camera at that point. And then any exposure compensation I dial in goes above and beyond.
Okay.
Again, these cameras are so great. I find that I let it do the work in getting me to the exposure, and then I add my own creative interpretation later. Well, we finished B. Let's move on to the C section. That's our timers and exposure lock controls.